Hey everybody, it's Bob Crossan, Senior Managing Editor for Water and Waste Digest. I am here with Eddy Daniel. He is Senior Line of Business Manager for Dunaway. We're going to talk about utilities that are looking to expand into the wastewater business, considerations to make that move, and some of the benefits that it could mean for your utility. So Eddy, thank you so much for being here. We appreciate you taking the time.
It's good to be here, Bob. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, and I know that you had done a presentation on this, and so why don't we just get right into it? Could you talk a little bit about some of those considerations utilities should make if they're looking to get into the wastewater business? What are some of the cons? What are some of the benefits there?
Yeah, sure. Bob, I've been in the utility business, in the engineering business for about 37 years now. And over that time term, I have worked to represent water supply corporations, water districts, and cities. And oftentimes, water supply corporations and water districts are not initially in the sewer business. They're only in the water business, only in the water utility business. And so, as the areas, especially here in the Northeast Texas area that I'm working in, as it has grown tremendously over the last several years, there's been some high density developments that will come into a previously rural area that maybe only had water utility service and maybe on-site kind of septic, on-site sewer related stuff. But because of high density developments, all of a sudden there's a demand for sewer and for a sewer collection system, sewer treatment systems. And because of that, especially when developers come in and create these high density developments, they look to the local utility instead of having to create a whole new utility. They look at the local utility to see if they can talk them into providing that service. Always better to have all of the utility service, the water and the wastewater provided by one utility. And so that's one of the considerations is there's a demand for it.
Hmm.
Another consideration for getting in the utility business is it helps a water utility if they previously only provided water utility services. It helps them to diversify in their business. That has some benefits. It spreads cost out, to the different people, but also it sort of cements their role in the area. It allows them to provide both water and wastewater service, which means it's less likely that other utilities, other surrounding governmental entities, whether they be cities or whatever, might come in and try to take their service area away. If one utility is providing all the necessary services, then there's really no one else that needs to come in and try to get into that area and take that service area, that certificated service area away. And so there's demand, there's a need regulatorily, to provide it in the service area, and then also it helps them to just diversify and to remain in existence in an area.
Hmm. One of the things too, I think that is a consideration is the financing side of it and the money element of that. So when utilities are looking to make this kind of a transition, what are some of the ways that they can try to finance it? What ways do you often advise or do you see utilities do that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So if a utility had to just start let's just assume that we have a water utility that is only provided water utility services, and they decide they want to get into the sewer business, whether that's sewer collection business or sewer treatment or both. In some cases, the request is for them to do both. Then it can be very expensive to start from scratch and to create a whole new sewer utility. The
Hmm.
good news is that most often in rural areas where there is no utility service or no sewer utility service, uh, uh, the service is being requested by typically a large, a high density developer. So it's a developer maybe that's come in, created a high density subdivision or a commercial area or a combination of residential commercial areas, and they're willing to finance the improvements because it helps them to sell their lots. It helps them to sell their development if sewer service is available. It also helps with density. So if sewer service is available, sewer collection and sewer treatment services available, then they can put in a much higher density than they can if they're using only on-site sewer, like septic tank, like aerobic systems or septic systems. And so it's really a win-win. The developer wins by being able to create higher density development that they can make more money on. It provides a necessary service, because if they don't have the sewer service, it's hard for them to sell their properties. And it's good for the utility in that the developer pays the bill for that. Now, in the end, the residents, whether they be homeowners or commercial businesses, they end up paying for the service ultimately through the fees related, either equity buy-in fees, impact fees, rates and services that may be provided. But it is a win for the water utility, because the developer is typically funding all of the cost of getting into that business.
Hmm. So
Now,
thinking,
I will say, if you don't mind, I'd like to
yeah, yeah,
follow
go
up.
for it.
In some cases, utilities decide to finance some of their own improvements, and they can do that through maybe through some governmental loans like USDA Rural Development, maybe Texas Water Development Board loans, but they'll also sell bond issues sometimes.
Hmm.
But more often than not, it's the developers who are paying for that initial installation of sewer collection lines and sewer treatment.
Yeah. So thinking long term on this too, you have also the operations and maintenance of those systems once they do get online, and then also there's some regulatory requirements that come with that too. Could you speak to kind of like how should utilities look at it from that long term perspective too? How do they build for that? How do they make sure that they're keeping that in mind when they're making this transition?
Yeah, that's a great question, Bob. So the challenge for water utilities is they've never been in the sewer business before, and so they do have to think about, what's the effect of getting in the sewer business. So always before, they've had certified water operators that may operate their utility system. They've got to get in. The fact that they're getting into the sewer business means they have to also hire certified sewer utility operators.
Hmm.
They have to have a certification to operate the sewer utility. Now, in many cases, you have operators that are both certified or have registrations in both water and sewer, but they just have to make sure that they meet the regulatory requirements. The TCEQ, the Texas Commission on
Hmm.
Environmental Quality here in Texas, they have certain minimum requirements depending on the type of sewer service you're providing. And so a utility has to be careful to look at those regulations to make sure they're able to hire qualified staff that have the certificates necessary to operate the utility. That comes with a cost impact. It costs some money to find new operators. Same with the operations and maintenance of the utility. That's something that they have to, if they've never been in the sewer business before, there's certain minimum amount of equipment they have to acquire. And some of those things might be like jet trucks and camera trucks, and the things that you use in a sewer utility that you don't necessarily use in a water utility. And so oftentimes the developer helps out with some one-time costs to provide some of those back trucks and camera that camera equipment, things like that. But also, typically, most of the operations and maintenance is comes out of the rates, just
Hmm.
the utility rates, the sewer services that are being provided to a local area. There are sewer rates that are being charged. The utility has to ensure that the rates that it's charging will also pay for all of the operations and maintenance of the system. Now, that's kind of tricky because when you first get into the business, you're not exactly sure what it's going to cost. And so typically what utilities will do is look in the kind of the general area, the neighborhood, the other utilities that are around that are providing sewer service, and they'll sort of mimic those rates initially. Then they'll start over a period of a few months. They'll be able to tell in a hurry if they're going to be able to meet those operations and maintenance and personnel costs that are necessary to provide those kinds of services. And then they'll have to do rate adjustments accordingly. The good news for water utilities, but because oftentimes You know, some of our clients are very large rural water utilities. They
Yeah.
serve in multiple counties even,
Hmm.
and so they may only be providing wastewater in one subdivision or one group of subdivisions, but the balance of their area is still just water utility service. The good news is you can have those stand on their own. So the water utility customers don't have to pay for the sewer utility
Hmm.
cost, and vice versa. And so it's good for the utility that, and it's good for the rest of the ratepayers of the utility that everything is isolated to the service that you are being provided. And
Yeah.
so the sewer utility service has to stand on its own.
Hmm. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, and it sounds like it's a great way, like you said, to diversify. It opens you up, and it may sound challenging and daunting probably from the get-go, but I imagine once you get your feet underneath you, actually you're just like, oh wow, okay, I'm glad that we did this.
Yeah. Most utilities, when they've been used to providing a utility service, in our case, many utilities are providing water utility service. They're comfortable with that. They do a good job at that. It's not that big a stretch to get into the wastewater business, especially if
Hmm.
it's just the sewer collection business. So if you're inside a subdivision, you're providing a water service, water distribution service, potable water service, then providing the retail sewer collection service is certainly not that much harder to do. So it is considerably easier than they might think. It's a little daunting to think about, but once you get into the business, most of them determine that it's not that big a deal.
Hmm.
We encourage our utilities to take a look at it, to at least give it a look, run the numbers, but because the numbers always have to work, but run the numbers, see if it makes sense, see if kind of feel around a little bit, see if they can find licensed operators to be able to operate the utility. And once they get comfortable with that, we encourage them to take that step. It usually is a step that they don't regret.
Hmm. Well, thanks so much, Eddie. I really appreciate you taking the time and talking us through this whole process and some of the considerations and whatnot. And for everyone else who is watching, definitely check out the video description down below. We have a resource here from Eddie that kind of relating to the presentation that he gave. We also have some other resources on our website that you might find interesting as well. So be sure to check out those links down below. And once more, Eddie, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me.